Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Dulemba, and today I'm going to talk to you about color. The first thing I want to talk to you about is figuring out what your personal color palette is. We all have one. It surrounds us. It's the colors that we buy things in over and over again, that we surround ourselves with in our lives. And that color palette can really go towards figuring out who we are and how we understand color. Now, I'm an illustrator, but I will be the first to admit that it took me a long time to understand color. In fact, one time I was working on a drawing for a collector's tin, and the artwork was actually sent to a different artist to do the color because I didn't understand color yet. Well, since then, I've learned a lot about color and a lot of tricks that I'm going to talk to you about today. And hopefully, your learning curve on understanding color will be a little bit shorter than mine was. So, how do you figure out what your personal color palette is? Well, first of all, you're going to need some supplies. I want you to get some colored pencils, which would be ideal, or maybe some markers, or even some paint chips from your local paint store, or you could even pull out little swatches from the magazines around your house. Now, once you have these colors together, you're going to use them to answer a few questions. The first question is, what are your 3 to 4 favorite colors? Now, only choose 3 to 4, and if they're pencils, you just grab those and hold them in your hand. And the next question is, what are the 3 to 4 colors that most occupy your closet? Now, if you're lucky, you can actually wear your colors. I can't actually. The only color out of my color palette that I can wear is the teal that I have on. The rest of my colors, my color palette is actually up in the upper corner of this slideshow, and I look terrible in orange and yellow and lime. So I had to go a few steps around to figure out what my color palette was. But maybe you're able to wear your colors. So what are your 3 to 4 favorite colors in your closet? The last question is, what are the 3 to 4 colors that most occupy your home or your room or your office or your space that you have control over decorating? So once you have all of these colors together, you're going to draw a little 1 by 1 inch squares and create a color palette. Now, you're also going to choose one more color that I call a baseline neutral. Now, that might be a color that you would paint the walls of a room before you decorate it with the other brighter colors. So sometimes that's a neutral like a gray. For me, it's actually a cornbread yellow. I've known people who have something as bright as a cobalt blue as their baseline neutral. But whatever it is, go ahead and figure that out and winnow down that collection of colored pencils that you've created to just a few colors, 3 or 4 tops. Now you might be able to do a subcolor, and I'll explain that in a minute. So if there's one that you're really on the fence about, maybe put it to the side just for now. So this is what it's going to look like when you actually put it all together. Now this is done digitally, but this is my personal color palette. And you can see how it actually matches the color up in the corner there. So my baseline neutral is a cornbread bread yellow. And then my colors are a burnt orange, lime green, and a dark peacock or aqua. And it shows up everywhere in my artwork. I didn't even realize this was my color palette until I spread all of my artwork out on the floor in front of me, and I squinted my eyes until I was seeing everything fuzzy. And I looked at all my artwork, and these colors kept popping up again and again. Even in my latest picture books that are mostly blue, shades of these colors are still predominant in my artwork. Now, this is another way to do it. This was a palette that I put together for my friend Olga. She has a really cute apartment in Edinburgh, Scotland, and she was wanting to turn it into an Airbnb. Well, my husband is an amateur photographer, and I'm an amateur decorator. And so we went over to help her get everything together and take photographs. Well, as I was walking around her apartment, trying to get it streamlined to look good for the photographs, I started noticing that she indeed had a very distinctive color palette. The black and the gray that you see here, those are her baseline neutrals. And then I saw lots of orange, fuchsia, cobalt, and aqua. But she did have some yellow too, not as much as the other colors, but that became an alternate primary or a sub color. So you can actually indicate it that way with a little square if there's a color that you're on the fence about. You can see this is how it ended up looking. So I took all these things from her apartment, I put them together. I'm going to lean over so you can see that there's even an orange in that bowl right there and a scarf that picks up on those same colors. And I wrote about it at this link right here if you'd like to go see it. So in the end, the pictures that we took for her Airbnb really just screamed her because the whole place looked like her. And everything that she bought to try to spruce up her place, she made sure to use these colors, and it all held together and tied together to make her apartment look really, really good, very slick. Learning how color works can help you understand the importance of your color palette. So let's talk a little bit about that. But first, I have to admit, you were lied to. So you were probably taught that the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. Well, they were wrong. Primary colors, the very definition of primary colors is that they can be mixed together to create all other colors, and that there are no colors that can be mixed together to create them. Well, that's not actually the case. When you mix red and blue together, you get a purple, but it's kind of a muddy purple. When you mix red and yellow, you get an orange, but it's not a very pleasing orange. And same thing with the yellow and the blue, just a very flat green. So really, the true primary colors are magenta, yellow, and cyan. And if you look at these colors, you can see that the secondary colors, the colors that are made when you combine them, are red and blue, which is the definition of a secondary color. And yet we've been taught that they were primary colors. So you can get much better colors by using these paints. Now, when I teach painting to my students, I don't let them use black or white. I have them use these colors, magenta, yellow, and cyan, and mix from there. If you need to expand your palette from there, you always can, but this is a great place to start to understand how to mix colors and really get good at understanding color and applying it to your own work. Here's a great video by Echo Gillette that talks more about color and pink and how it's actually not a real color and how different colors have different vibrancies. I actually use this video when I'm teaching my students. I think she did a great job and it's worth watching. Now, you can't have color without light. In this artwork by Fritz Baumgarten, you see that there's a warm light source at the middle of this piece with the candlelight. And in the background, we have cool light creating a purple or bluish sky in the background. And indeed, color has temperature. So warm colors tend to be things like fire, and cool colors tend to be things like coolness, like ice or water, those sorts of things. So when you're talking about applying light to color, you've got to be thinking in temperatures. If you have a warm light shining on things, all of the temperature of things that are being hit by that light also need to show warm in their color tones. If you have a cool light shining on things, they need to be showing cool in their color tones. So you've probably heard that warm light creates cool shadows and cool light creates warm shadows, like in this piece by Maxfield Parrish, where you can see a yellow or warm light source is creating very cool blue shadows. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Christopher Beatrice did a great article at Muddy Colors explaining the nuances of how shadow works and why we see so much blue in shadows. So again, I think this is a wonderful reference if you want to follow up and learn more. It all comes down to understanding the Munsell color system, or understanding how colors work. In this system, we label colors by 3 names. Hue is the color name or family, like orange, yellow, red. Value is the color's light or darkness from white to black. And that's that big column in the middle. Now, again, like I said, I don't let my students use white or black when they're first learning how to work with color. Chroma is the color's intensity or saturation. In other words, when you add white to a color, it creates a tint, like I've done here with my own color palette. When you add black to a color, it creates a shade. And you can see how much it has changed my color palette. The lights become pastels and the darks become extremely saturated and very dark and intense. Neither one is my color palette anymore, which is really important to remember, because I would never put these 2 colors together. It's a pastel, which to me is soft and comforting and maybe a quiet color, next to a really loud, vibrant color that wants to dance off the page. They're telling different stories and they frankly just don't go together. So just to talk about, the differences between color, how do we figure out what does go together? So let's think about a sunny day in Arizona. Close your eyes for a minute and think about that blue sky against yellow and orange rocks. Maybe there's an olive or lime green cactus in the foreground. They're all very saturated, warm colors. And just to put that in contrast, let's think about another geographical location. How about London on a rainy day? What colors do you see now? I'll bet you see a lot of grays and blacks, maybe some pale grays. But even if you see red, I'll bet it's a cool red. So for my MFA, I compared 10 years of award-winning picture books, the Caldecots in the US and the Greenways in the UK, just to see how different these geographical locations changed the ideas of color. They really did. You can probably already see it. The American titles are on the left and the UK titles are on the right. And maybe you can see Harris finds his feet down in the corner here. Very different looking. Now I ran this through an algorithm and I came up with the actual palette that each one of them had. This was the palette on the left for the US and on the right for the UK. Really, really different. The one in the US is a very warm, glowy palette. There's two yellows, two, no yellows at all in the UK palette. In the US palette, there is a very warm red. In the UK palette, there's a red, but that's a very cold red. And you can see the one on the left might fit in a sunny day in Arizona, and the one on the right might fit very well on a rainy day in London. I went to the Bologna Book Fair several years ago, and it was really interesting to walk around to the different booths. You could tell which ones were the American booths very easily because everything was saturated and popping out at you. It was very vibrant. It was part of the reason I wanted to go to the UK for my MFA in illustration, because I wanted to get that influence of the slightly more, what I think is a more mature or modified color palette. And it did, it helped a lot. So in an article that I wrote for the SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Bulletin, called Illuminating Color, I asked Tony DiTerlizzi of Spiderwick Chronicles and James Gurney of Dinotopia to discuss how they use color in their own artwork. Now, Tony said that you could always tell where the main character was because that would be the point of highest saturation and highest contrast. James talked about the light source would always be shining on the main character. So you always knew what to look at. They're actually manipulating your eye, making sure that you're looking at what they intend for you to look at first. So what happens if you don't have contrast in your artwork? Why is contrast important? You've probably seen this before, colors that when they're next to each other, they vibrate. Well, what's happening here is that the colors are the same value. Colors have value just like white to black has value on that Munsell scale that I showed you earlier. Well, if the blue here and the red and the green are all at the exact same level of value, they're all fighting for your eye to show which one is in front and which one's behind. The way our eyes work, they're constantly trying to figure out what is in front and what is behind. And if all of them are the same value, well, they're all trying to fight for that distance, and therefore they start to vibrate. And just to prove the fact that these are all the same value, I turned this image into black and white. Got a slight difference there, but for the most part, you can see they are the same value. Now, this is all having to do with how the rods and cones perceive color in our eye. And Pantone, who comes up with the color of the year every year, and they are experts at color, has some wonderful articles about how we see color and how we understand color on their website. So there's another resource that you can go look at if you would like to learn more. So if everything is the same value, it might be one of the reasons that you might be hearing that your work looks flat. So one of the other tricks that I tell people is something I call the fruit salad theory. So here's this luscious bowl of fruit salad, and all of the fruit in this bowl is about the same value. Everything is the same intensity level. Everything is the same saturation level. Therefore, all you see is this flat bowl of fruit salad. Nothing's jumping out at you. Nothing's moving away from you. So I took one of the pieces of fruit and I kept the saturation where it was, but I dropped down the saturation of everything else. Now where does your eye go? I bet it went to that one strawberry. It's because now that strawberry is coming forward and everything else is going backward. So you have to learn how to create depth. When you're using your own palette, you've got to figure out how that palette applies when you're creating depth, when moving things forward and moving things back. And again, you can do that by doing, say, a lighter shade of red, not adding white, but a lighter shade of red, just meaning a little bit more of a wash, or a more intense shade of red if you need to make something pop forward. So color and light really can't be separated. If you want to go read my article, I think that would help you understand that some more. How can all of this help you as a creator and your portfolio? Well, knowing your personal color palette can help you drive your creative decisions when you have a new piece of work that you have to do and you just don't know where you want to go with the color. If you want it to look good in your portfolio, creating a cohesive look in your portfolio, maybe you choose to use your own color palette. It can also make your portfolio very cohesive, but also help develop your personal style, because that color palette will become associated with you. So if an art director is thinking, manuscripts come across their desk and they're thinking, who do I want to do this? Maybe they have your postcard on the wall. Rather than being a jack of all trades who can do lots of different things, you get known for a particular look, a particular color palette, and they say, that's the feel that I want. I'm going to go to that person for that because that's what I want this to look like. So it can also make you more memorable to art directors, which is, of course, what we all want so that we get the work that we want. So all of this said, I hope these tips will help you become a little bit more expert at understanding color and applying it consciously. Because bottom line, that's really all this is figuring out the things that you were doing with color anyway and using them intentionally going forward. That's how you create your own personal color palette. I hope it helps you as much as it's helped me. Thanks so much for your time.